America's 50-year petrodollar monopoly has an expiration date. And according to the classified documents I've seen, that date is sooner than anyone imagines. I'm Megyn Kelly. For 20 years, I've covered the biggest economic stories of our time, but nothing I've reported on compares to what I'm about to reveal. The financial foundation that has kept America as the world's dominant superpower for half a century is crumbling. And most Americans have no idea it's even happening. The petrodollar system isn't just some abstract economic concept. It's the reason you can live the lifestyle you live. It's the reason America can print money without causing hyperinflation. It's the reason your government can run massive deficits without immediate consequences. And it's all about to end. Let me be clear about why you should listen to me on this. During my time at Fox News, I had access to sources most journalists never meet: Treasury officials, Federal Reserve insiders, foreign policy architects who designed America's economic strategy. I interviewed Henry Kissinger in 2014, just 2 years before his death. Off camera during a commercial break, he said something that stuck with me. "The petrodollar was never meant to last forever, Megyn. It was meant to buy us time." I didn't understand what he meant then. I do now. When I moved to NBC, I had even more access to high-level sources: State Department officials, CIA economic analysts, people who track global monetary flows that never make the evening news. That's where I first heard about the transition timeline, a confidential assessment of when the petrodollar system would become unsustainable. The date they gave me was 2030. That was in 2018. We're now in 2025. The timeline has accelerated. Now that I'm independent at MK Media, I can tell you what those sources were really saying, what they were preparing for, and why they were so concerned. Because the petrodollar system isn't just ending, it's being actively destroyed by our adversaries, and they're closer to success than most people realize. First, let me explain what the petrodollar system actually is, because most Americans don't understand the foundation of their own prosperity. In 1973, after the Yom Kippur War and the Arab oil embargo, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis would sell their oil only in US dollars. In exchange, America would provide military protection for the Saudi regime. This deal was later extended to other oil-producing countries. Soon, if you wanted to buy oil anywhere in the world, you needed US dollars. Why was this revolutionary? Because oil is the most traded commodity on Earth. Every country needs oil. Every country needs dollars to buy oil. This created artificial demand for US dollars. Countries had to hold dollars in reserve, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. It allowed America to print money and export inflation. When the Federal Reserve created new dollars, those dollars went overseas to buy oil. Other countries absorbed the inflation while America got the goods. It allowed America to run massive trade deficits. We could import more than we exported because other countries needed our dollars for oil purchases. It allowed America to finance government spending through foreign investment. Other countries bought U.S. Treasury bonds because they needed a place to park their excess dollars. The petrodollar system has been America's greatest strategic advantage. It's been our economic superpower, but every empire's advantage eventually becomes its weakness. And America's adversaries have been planning the petrodollar's destruction for decades. The attack began in 2010, though most people didn't recognize it as an attack. China started bilateral trade agreements that bypassed the dollar. Small deals at first, a few billion here, a few billion there. Russia began accepting rubles and yuan for energy exports. Again, small scale initially, but the precedent was set. Iran started selling oil for euros and gold. The U.S. imposed sanctions, but other countries kept buying. These looked like isolated incidents. Economic diversification, normal market evolution. They weren't. They were coordinated moves in a long-term strategy to break American monetary hegemony. And the strategy accelerated dramatically after 2022. When the United States froze Russia's foreign currency reserves, every country in the world received a message: your dollar reserves aren't safe if you cross America. The response was swift and decisive. Countries began reducing their dollar reserves and creating alternative systems. China and Russia expanded their bilateral trade in yuan and rubles. Brazil and India joined the arrangement. South Africa followed. BRICS wasn't just about economic cooperation anymore. It became about de-dollarization. But the real earthquake came in March 2023, when Saudi Arabia announced it would accept yuan for oil sales to China. This broke the fundamental rule of the petrodollar system. For the first time since 1973, major oil transactions were happening without U.S. dollars. The Biden administration publicly downplayed this development. It's just one bilateral arrangement, Treasury officials said. The dollar remains dominant. Privately, they were panicking. I know because I talked to them. because Saudi Arabia wasn't acting alone. The Saudis had coordinated with China, Russia, and other BRICS members. This was phase one of a systematic plan to replace the dollar. Phase two began in January 2024 when the United Arab Emirates announced it would accept multiple currencies for oil sales: yuan, rubles, euros, even gold. Phase three started in June 2024 when Iran, Venezuela, and Nigeria formed an oil trading bloc that excluded the dollar entirely. By December 2024, roughly 23% of global oil sales were happening without U.S. dollars. That might not sound like much, but it represents the fastest decline in dollar usage in the system's 50-year history. And the pace is accelerating. My sources in the intelligence community estimate that by 2027, over 40% of oil trades will bypass the dollar. By 2030, the majority of global oil sales could happen in alternative currencies. At that point, the petrodollar system effectively ceases to exist. But oil isn't the only front in this war. China has been building alternative financial infrastructure for over a decade. The Belt and Road Initiative isn't just about building roads and ports. It's about building a yuan-denominated economic zone that excludes the dollar. The Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, CIPS, is China's alternative to SWIFT. It allows countries to conduct international transactions without touching the dollar-based system. Usage of CIPS has grown 50% annually since 2021. Over 1,300 financial institutions in 100 countries now use the system. Russia's SPFS system serves the same function. After Western sanctions cut Russia from SWIFT, SPFS became the primary payment system for Russian trade. These aren't backup systems anymore. They're primary alternatives to dollar-based finance, and they're working. In 2023, China conducted over $7 trillion in cross-border payments through CIPS. Russia processed over $2 trillion through SPFs. Combined, that's nearly half the volume of SWIFT transactions. And the alternative systems are growing while SWIFT usage declines. The infrastructure for a post-dollar world already exists. Countries are using it, and it's expanding rapidly. But perhaps the most devastating development is happening in central bank reserves. For decades, central banks around the world held 60 to 70% of their foreign currency reserves in U.S. dollars. This created automatic demand for dollars and treasury bonds. That percentage has been falling steadily since 2008. It's now below 60% for the first time since 1995. But the real change is in the composition of new reserves. Central banks are adding gold, yuan, euros, even cryptocurrency to their reserves. They're deliberately diversifying away from the dollar. The International Monetary Fund's latest data shows that central banks added more gold to their reserves in 2024 than in any year since 1971. China alone added over 800 tons of gold. Russia added 400 tons. India added 350 tons. They're not buying gold for investment returns. They're buying gold as dollar alternatives, and they're coordinating these purchases. The timing isn't coincidental. This is economic warfare. The goal is to make the dollar unnecessary for international trade and investment, and they're succeeding. Let me show you how this affects your daily life, because this isn't abstract geopolitics. This is about your paycheck, your savings, your retirement. The petrodollar system has allowed America to live beyond its means for 50 years. We consume more than we produce. We import more than we export. We spend more than we earn. This has only been possible because other countries needed our dollars and bought our debt. When the petrodollar system ends, that arrangement ends too. Foreign demand for U.S. Treasury bonds will collapse. The government will have to pay much higher interest rates to attract buyers. Federal spending will become unsustainable almost overnight. Either massive spending cuts or massive tax increases. Probably both. The trade deficit will have to shrink dramatically. Americans will have to consume less and produce more. Import prices will skyrocket. Everything from electronics to clothing to food will become much more expensive. The dollar will weaken significantly against other currencies. Your purchasing power will decline. Interest rates will rise across the economy. Mortgages, car loans, credit cards, business loans, everything will cost more to finance. The stock market will face enormous pressure as foreign investment flows reverse. Real estate values will decline as foreign buyers disappear and domestic buyers face higher financing costs. This isn't a recession. This is a fundamental reset of America's economic position in the world, from global hegemon to normal country, from economic superpower to just another large economy. The lifestyle changes will be dramatic. Americans have gotten used to cheap imports, low interest rates, and unlimited government spending. All of that has been subsidized by the petrodollar system. When the subsidy ends, Americans will pay the true cost of their consumption. And most people have no idea this is coming because the mainstream media isn't covering it. The politicians aren't talking about it. The economists are pretending it won't happen. I understand why. It's terrifying to contemplate. It challenges everything Americans believe about their country's permanent dominance. But denial won't change reality. And reality is accelerating toward us whether we're ready or not. My intelligence sources believe the tipping point will come between 2027 and 2030. The exact timing depends on geopolitical developments, but the direction is clear. A major oil producer will announce complete abandonment of dollar pricing, probably Saudi Arabia, under pressure from China. This will trigger a cascade. Other producers will follow immediately. The dollar's role in energy markets will collapse within months. Foreign central banks will begin massive dollar sales. Treasury bond yields will spike. The Federal Reserve will face an impossible choice between defending the dollar and preventing domestic economic collapse. Financial markets will realize the game is over. Capital flight will begin. The dollar will enter freefall. This isn't speculation. This is the assessment of people whose job it is to protect America's economic interests, and they're preparing for it, quietly, behind the scenes. The Federal Reserve has been studying central bank digital currencies, not for convenience, for control. When the petrodollar collapses, the government will need new tools to manage the economic transition. Digital currencies provide unprecedented monetary control. The Treasury has been stress testing scenarios for reduced foreign demand for U.S. debt. They're preparing for a world where America has to finance its spending domestically. The Defense Department has been analyzing the national security implications of economic decline. They're planning for a less globally dominant America. These aren't theoretical exercises. These are active preparations for a post-petrodollar world. Because the people who run America know what's coming. They just can't tell you publicly without triggering the crisis they're trying to manage. So they prepare in silence while telling you everything is fine. But everything is not fine. And waiting for them to solve this problem is a mistake. Because governments don't prevent monetary transitions. They just try to control them. Your financial security is your responsibility. And that security depends on understanding what's coming and preparing for it. First, reduce your dollar exposure. Not completely, but significantly. This doesn't mean moving to another country or converting everything to foreign currency. It means diversifying across assets that hold value regardless of dollar strength. Real estate in stable markets, precious metals, commodity-focused investments, some exposure to foreign currencies through international funds. The goal isn't to speculate on the dollar's decline. It's to protect yourself from purchasing power loss. Second, reduce your debt. Every dollar you owe will become harder to pay back if your real income declines. When the petrodollar system ends, inflation will likely accelerate. Wages will lag behind price increases. Debt service will consume a larger portion of household budgets. Pay down credit cards. Pay off car loans, consider accelerating mortgage payments. The goal is to enter the transition with minimal fixed obligations. Third, develop skills and income streams that don't depend on global dollar flows. The sectors that benefited most from the petrodollar system will suffer most from its decline. Finance, luxury goods, high-end services. The sectors that will thrive are those that serve domestic needs. Healthcare, infrastructure, basic manufacturing, food production, energy. Position yourself in recession-resistant, domestically focused industries. Fourth, build local networks and relationships. When global systems become unreliable, local systems become more important. Community banks instead of national banks. Local suppliers instead of global supply chains. This isn't about becoming a survivalist. It's about developing resilience in a less connected world. Fifth, stay informed through independent sources. The mainstream media will be the last to report the petrodollar's collapse. They have too much invested in the current system. Independent journalists, international media, alternative economic analysis. Diversify your information sources like you diversify your investments. The most important thing is to act while you still have time. Monetary transitions happen gradually, then suddenly. We're still in the gradual phase, but the sudden phase is approaching. When it arrives, the time for preparation will be over. The only option will be adaptation to the new reality. And the new reality will be much more challenging for most Americans. I don't tell you this to create fear. I tell you this to create awareness, because awareness creates options, and options create freedom. The petrodollar system made America rich and powerful. Its collapse will make America normal. That's not necessarily bad. Most countries function without monetary hegemony. Life continues, economies adapt, but it will be different, much different. Americans will have to work harder for the same standard of living, save more, consume less, compete more effectively with the rest of the world. The easy money era is ending. The competitive era is beginning. Those who understand this transition and prepare for it will do fine. Those who ignore it and hope it goes away will struggle. The choice is yours, but you have to make it soon because America's adversaries have already made their choice. They've chosen to end the petrodollar system, and they're winning. The question isn't whether the petrodollar will collapse. The question is whether you'll be ready when it does. I'm Megyn Kelly. I've spent my career exposing truths that powerful people prefer to keep hidden. The coming end of the petrodollar system is the biggest story of our time, and almost nobody is covering it. But the signs are everywhere for those who know how to look. Foreign countries diversifying away from dollars, alternative payment systems gaining adoption, gold purchases accelerating, oil trades bypassing dollars. The foundation is cracking, the structure is wobbling. The collapse won't be announced in advance. It will happen when the world suddenly realizes the emperor has no clothes. When confidence breaks, everything breaks quickly. 50 years of American monetary dominance, ending in our lifetime. The biggest economic story in generations, hidden in plain sight. The end of the world as we know it. The beginning of something completely different. Are you prepared for what comes next? This has been Megyn Kelly. Thank you for watching. And remember, in a world of managed narratives, independent analysis is your most valuable asset. The petrodollar era is ending. The post-American era is beginning. Whether you sink or swim depends on whether you see the wave coming. I've shown you the wave. The rest is up to you.